Welcome to the show. I'm going to start with a huge shocker. Now, we all know over the last 3 years, housing unaffordability, it's been a thing. They keep talking about the fact that we're having an affordability crisis. But I'll bet most of you think the worst time for affordability was 3 weeks ago. Actually, it was 3 years ago. So it's time to once again bring you hope and possibilities with my favorite friends, math and data.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
What's happening, my How to Buy a Home is I'm David Sidoni, often imitated but never duplicated. Yeah, and we're back again with another boost of positive information for your quest of home ownership. My mission here, it's been simple. Way back since 2019. I just want to explain that most people have been getting the wrong advice. And when it comes to first-time home buyers, unfortunately, you're getting that from the licensed individuals that are supposed to help you. There are so many underqualified, inexperienced, and undertrained realtors and lenders that are part of this greedy corporate structure that's designed to give you the least amount of service possible. So everything I do here is to combat that. In this podcast library, I've given you all the rarely utilized insider tips so you can avoid that trap and discover the path of least resistance for first-time homebuyers. And that path, it's far more attainable and affordable in 2026 than you've been told. So today's episode, it's going to be a quick blast of encouragement, and then I'm going to give you the secrets for your own personal journey. First, I'm going to tell you the truth about the 2026 housing affordability. Then I'll share with you the best personal things that you can do in this year and moving into 2027 as well. This is stuff that I've covered in great detail in past episodes, but today I'm going to give it to you with the 2026 twist. So I'll be going over some new information on credit scores. We'll also talk about your debt and your debt to income ratios, the savings that you're going to need, and the requirements for employment and income. Now, those 4 things, they make up what kind of mortgage you can get to buy your first home. And all of these have better and more affordable options for first-time homebuyers in 2026, despite what you're hearing with all the sky is falling BS headlines that are out there. This is what the actual data says. Since 2023, prices have remained somewhat flat, and the interest rates, they've gone down since the end of 2023. And yes, that means there is a path today, and it's mathematically more affordable now to buy a home than it has been since 2023. Here's how housing affordability ranks over the last few years. In 2023, that was the worst year. 24 was the second worst. 25 was the third worst. And coming in 4th place, that's today, 2026. And if you're wondering, how can that be? Well, it's just math. Housing affordability at its core, it's about how much cash you need to bring in to buy a home, and then the loan that you're going to be using and how that affects your monthly payment. With prices being flat and interest rates coming down since 2023, the affordability isn't as bad as everyone's saying. The average median home in the U.S., it was $400,000 in 2023. Interest rates were at 7 to 8%. In 2024, prices went up to $420,000 and rates were at 6.7%. And in 2025, home prices dropped to $415,000 for the median price, and interest rates dropped to 6.6%. And today, median home price right now is $417,000, and interest rates are averaging 6.25%. So that means the math in the last 3.5 years, if you're putting 10% down, these are the monthly payments. Your full payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, what we call PITI. In 2023, it was $3,000. In 2024, it was $2,920. In 2025, $2,870. And in 2026, the lowest in all 4 of those years, $2,795. Let those numbers sink in. While you've been wondering if things are ever going to get better, those numbers, based on the median home price and the actual mortgage payment that you pay, they are something that should be giving you a lot of hope. And here's some more data to give you hope. The cash needed to buy a home, it's actually gone down. Realtor.com just reported that the typical down payment during the first quarter of 2026, it was down 19% from 2025 to the lowest level that we've ever seen since 2021. Yeah, since 2021. And down 19% from last year. The number that they reported was $23,400 was the average down payment that people needed. And that is the fourth consecutive quarterly decline. Things are moving in your direction. Hannah Jones, a senior economist at Realtor.com, said, quote, down payments are falling as the housing market slowly tilts towards buyers. High prices and borrowing costs continue to test affordability, and while conditions are improving, some of the buyers re-entering the market are doing so via government-backed programs that have lower down payment requirements. This tells us the housing market is broadening, unquote. Now, what she's talking about are FHA loans and VA loans. They now account for more than 1/3 of purchase mortgages, which opens up way more options for first-time home buyers. The other thing they reported was that the typical buyer FICO score, your credit score, it's also trended downward since the middle of 2025, dropping to 733 as the credit score average for buyers in the first quarter of 2025. Now, does that mean that everybody out there needs a minimum of $23,400 and a 733 credit score to buy a home? Not at all. Those are the averages. But no matter what the price range is, the averages are dropping. That's the important news to you. 2026 is more affordable than you've been told, and that's not me talking, that's the math, the new market conditions, the lower down payment options people are taking advantage of, the down payment assistance grants, and in many, many markets, what we're seeing more in 26 than we've seen over the last 3.5, 4 years, sellers are giving credits back to the buyer, cash to you to cover their closing costs. Now, today's quick hits that I'm giving you on the path of least resistance to home ownership, this is inspired by one of my favorite economic analysts, my dude, Zach Faust. I interviewed him on episode 455. I love that dude. We totally vibe on understanding that there are slanted rules in today's economic game, and we want to show you not how to change it, but just how to beat it. Because if you follow the old rules and the outdated paths to home ownership, you're going to hit some major resistance. And that means your hope and optimism for buying a home turns into hopelessness. But there are solutions for you, and people are buying. Despite how it feels and what you may have heard, 2026 home buying is mathematically attainable. And you can hear real stories from 75 different first-time home buyers who bought in those less affordable years of 2023, 24, and 25. They're in the interview episodes listed in the episode guide in the show notes. In the past, I have discussed the big three in detail. Now, if you're a longer listener, you know I've discussed the big three in detail. That's your credit score, your debt management, and your savings. They're right there for you. There's steps, 3, 4, and 5 in the 10 steps for the first-time home buyer. Those started at episode 400. Today, I'm going to go over those, and I'm going to drop in a fourth factor, income and employment requirements. Your individual personal numbers on these four things determine how much of a home loan that a bank is going to approve for you. So we'll start with the credit score. Big news on this one. Recently, and this is just last year and starting to come into the real marketplace in 2026, the score that the banks use, the old FICO score, it's changing. And some lenders are starting to use not a FICO score, but something called a Vantage Score 4.0. And for some first-time homebuyers, this is a big advantage. But the main thing that you need to know is that no bank, nobody trying to give you money to buy a home is using your Credit Karma score. Here's the big insider tip. Too many people are getting the wrong information. Any score that you get for free from the credit monitoring services, even sometimes your bank, it's purely a sales tactic. Because everyone has dozens of credit scores, like way more than you think. 40 plus variations, and all those free services, including your bank and anyone else, is like, oh, do this. They show you the score that is going to most entice you to reach out to them to buy some of their services or use their credit cards so that you can improve your score. So know the game and know the rules to beat it. When you're applying for a home loan, the banks, they're going to be using scores that come from the 3 credit bureaus, and they're using a very specific score, not the one that everyone else is giving you. And here's a big tip. They do not average the 3 scores. They take the middle score. When they get really fancy, they call it the mid score. I guess they just don't have time to say the full word middle. Now, if you're buying a home with a partner, they're not averaging 6 scores either. They're using the lowest person's mid score. That is why Even if you don't think that you should talk to a realtor or a lender if you're a year or two out, you absolutely should. Because if it's you and a partner and you need both incomes to qualify for the loan that you want, when you talk to a professional team early, they can let you know exactly which of your 40 plus scores the banks are going to be looking at. They'll give you the mid scores and they'll let you know, all right, well, this one's the lowest. That's the one they're using, despite the fact that the other 5 scores might be great. And the reason why you want to do that early is because they can help you get a better rate, a better loan product, and better fees. But the only way to do that is with time. If you wait to get this accurate information until you're a month or two before you buy a home, time is the only thing that you can't get back. And time, that is what you need to push your credit score up. In episode 403, I break down the fact that they have a 20-point tier system that the banks use to approve you for a home loan. You can get a home loan with a credit score as low as 600, even 580. But when you're working with your lenders, most of the time, they're going to say they like a minimum of 620. And in 2026, with this new scoring, some people are getting some really good pricing rates and terms at a 680 credit score or above. And remember, the national average is 733. You do not need an 800 credit score to get qualified for a home loan. And the next foundational factor that is going to determine how much of a home loan you're going to be able to get, that's your debt. For buying a home, most importantly, debt matters, but not your total debt, not your gross amount that you owe. It's your monthly debt. What you do is you add up your minimum monthly payments on your debts. I don't care if it's student loans that are $200,000 or $300,000. What's your monthly payment? Add those all up, get that monthly number, and that's what the banks consider when they're talking about debt, because they're going to determine how much you can qualify with a formula called your monthly debt to income ratio, sometimes called your DTI, your monthly minimum debt obligations divided by your gross income. That's how you get a DTI percentage. Nothing to do with your gigantic debt number. So if you've got $2,000 a month in your payments divided by, let's say, $6,000 of a gross monthly income, that's gross before taxes, $2,000, $6,000, that's a 33% debt to income ratio. All the details on this are in episode 404. The bummer thing about, well, all of these pillars is there's a bunch of old rules, archaic guidelines that people think they have to live by in order to get a home loan. And the one about your debt to income ratio, your DTI, is that it's not safe and not prudent unless your DTI is below 30%. That is the old rules, when rents were not as redonkulously crazy high as they are today. In a post-2023 housing market, after COVID, prices shot up and the rents kept going with them. So many first-time homebuyers, they actually beat the affordability crisis using the math from the rent replacement strategy. That's in episode 440. And using the spreadsheet from episode 460, the real rent versus buy calculation. And they understand that there are still safe and actually more fiscally responsible options for you to stop renting using a DTI higher than 30%. And in fact, a lot of loans are going to give you DTIs of 41 to 50%. I'm definitely not saying everybody should do that, but I'm saying that when you have the full math in those episodes that I talked about, you're going to see that that 30% rule, that was for the boomers when the rent was super cheap and the wages were keeping up with inflation. Now, you don't have to know all the detailed math today. That's fine. But as a coach for 20 years of this stuff, the biggest mistake that I see is so many people out there, they refuse to hire a professional team because they don't want to bother anybody. And I understand why you feel that way, because the real estate industry sucks and they're not offering that to you. Most of them aren't. And so they don't end up getting the true numbers and they just stick to that old rule. That is so many years of rent that they're not paying to themselves. They're not growing any wealth, because they don't know the true affordability of a payment with, call it a 43% debt to income ratio. So the way to beat that is hire your team early, get your numbers, do the math and the research, find out if there are safe, responsible, and more importantly, financially beneficial options that exist for you. Doesn't mean you have to buy a home if you figure it out and go, well, that's too much for me. But if you figure it out and you realize, wow, that old rule was way out of whack, maybe you can stop renting far earlier take control of your life and start building stability through home ownership. In fact, I recently had a listener email me with a question on this very topic. They had some really good money saved, and they were in a high cost of living area. They were paying like over $3,500 a month in rent. They were insistent on getting a loan that was no more than 30% of their debt to income ratio. But unfortunately, the homes they found at that price point in that high cost of living area, it didn't fit their criteria. So I asked them one simple question. Have you actually run the numbers with a trusted strategic advisor lender, not just some order taker and number cruncher, to see how much more the payment would be, and then compare that to the rent that you would spend while you're trying to increase your down payment to make that 30% DTI number work? And I told them, I guarantee you, the numbers will be in the multiple tens of thousands in rent that you spend trying to save up for a bigger down payment versus the very small amount that it actually reduces your monthly payment and the very small hundreds of dollars that it would be in an increase in your monthly payment using a 44% DTI versus a 30% DTI loan. If all that went over your head, or it sounded like freaking gibberish to you, here's the advice from a guy giving all this away to you for free for years, the guy who isn't a lender. I'm not trying to get you to be my client. I'm just giving this stuff away. You don't know what you don't know. So if that didn't make any sense, then it's time to do some more research and to hire yourself a trusted advisor first. You want someone that's going to walk you through this for 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Especially in those high cost of living areas, because 2026 has plenty of attainable and affordable options, and all the old standard conventional guidelines, they do not take into account the full 2026 math living in this economy with these rents. There are more details in episodes 440, the rent replacement strategy, episode 443, what can I afford, episode 457, 2026 real details on is it a buy or wait market. And then episode 460, mentioned that one before, that's where you get the real spreadsheet on renting versus buying, even in what is considered to be an unaffordable 2026 market. And the good news is we figured out that 2026, it's actually the fourth most unaffordable market compared to 23, 24, and 25. The next foundational factor, number 3, is how much you need to save. As you heard earlier, the total down payment average dropped 19% down to $23,400. And right now, the median home price at $417,000, that's an average down payment of 5.6%. So wherever you are now, raise your hand if you thought you needed 20% down payment to buy a home. Hey, welcome to the podcast. You must be new, because I try to debunk that myth all the time. Most first-time home buyers are using a 3% down payment using what's called a conventional loan, or a 3.5% down payment using an FHA loan, which is a great one if you've got a lower credit score or not a ton of savings. Want to keep in mind, though, we're just talking about the down payment. None of the numbers I've given you are taking into account the closing costs. And I go super conservative, real high on these, and estimate you should do between 2 and 3% of an estimate on your closing costs. In episode 405, that's where I go deep into the saving details. So myth number 1, forget 20% down. It's not happening anymore, and it is an old Jurassic dinosaur idea. And then myth number 2, don't go into an online mortgage calculator and punch in 5% down, 3.5% down, and believe those numbers. That's only part of your own personal equation. We see buyers all the time, even in the unaffordable years of 23, 24, and 25, who put their goal at a 5% down payment and 3% closing costs. Again, it's a high estimate that we recommend here. That would be 8% of your desired purchase price. And they ended up discovering options that were much less than the 8%. But even if you're running at those high protective numbers, here's what you're looking at. On a $400,000 home, your starting goal should be $32,000. For a $600,000 home, it's $48,000. But I am telling you, check out the interviews in the episode guide. We have seen an overabundance of buyers who, when they're working with the right strategic advisors, using all the tools that I mentioned earlier, the low down payments, the seller credits, down payment assistance, They ended up buying homes with a total all-in cost, that's the down payment and the closing costs, of only 5% total, not 8%. Some of them 3%, and sometimes less than 1% when they discover all the first-time homebuyer options available in 2026. The FHA, the zero down payment options with USDA that you can find in rural areas, and the zero down payment options in the amazing VA loan that's for our active military and our veterans. I got to tell you, if you're military or you know anyone that is, share this podcast now. Tell them that we appreciate what they've done, and there's not a lot that's working with a lot of the VA benefits, but this one still is. They've earned an amazing option, and no one who is a veteran, none of them should ever have to rent if they're going up to $2,000 or $2,500 a month. You have buying options. And the fourth main factor for you getting approved for an affordable home loan, this is the bonus on top of the big three, that's your income and your employment. This is another one where there are definitely some dinosaur myths that are costing you way too much rent money. For instance, a lot of people say that you got to have 2 years on the job. Yeah, that's an old standard, but there are multiple different loan options and loan products where there are ways to work around that, or you don't necessarily have to have it. If you've got a good job and you have even just a letter of intent, even if you haven't started yet, sometimes you can get a loan based on that. And then potentially sometimes you have to add in the contract, but there are ways. One of the things that I tell people all the time that nobody believes is that we've had buyers get loans while they're still in college. People who never even had a job their entire life. And episode 129 is an example. It's an interview with Quasi who did that. Another thing about the employment that is a little bit of a myth is that if you change jobs, that starts the old 2-year clock all over again. The deal is if it's in the same industry, it's going to count as steady and regular employment, and you can still qualify for the top loan products. And I know a lot of people who are self-employed or run their own business, and they think that they're out of luck. There are a bunch of loan programs for self-employed people too. It's all about how you file your taxes with the IRS. Again, I sound like a broken record all the time, but I've had so many people that make great money as self-employed people, but they write everything off. And yeah, maybe they made 6 figures for the last 3 years, but because they didn't talk to a professional team first, their taxes show that they only made $40,000 a year because they wrote everything off so they wouldn't have to pay big taxes and get a big old fat return. So if you're self-employed and you're even thinking about buying a home in the next 3 years, pause this episode and immediately go to episode 447, where I interviewed a tax professional who knows how to prepare your tax return so that you don't go broke and you don't have to pay tens of thousands in taxes, but you still show a good income to the IRS so you can get approved for a home loan. There are loans for self-employed people. So then the answer to the big question everyone wants to know, what kind of income do you need? Well, right now, with good credit and no debt and a 5% down payment, the income qualifications are about $75,000 to $80,000 a year to buy a $400,000 home. That can be on your own, or that can be 2 incomes if you're buying with a partner. Now, what if you don't make $75,000 or $80,000? And $400,000 homes are what you're looking at. Most people think the only way to get approved for a bigger home loan is to make more income. And while your gross monthly income number, it is important, and it's a constant variable that all the banks are going to use. Understanding the DTI ratio can drastically change your loan approval. Let me give you this example. If you're approved for a $400,000 home with an $800 a month car payment, you would need to make about $100K. Now, without that $800 a month payment, that's when you only need to make $75,000 to $80,000. That single payment, that is increasing your salary minimum requirement by $20,000 to $25,000. So it's definitely not just about getting a promotion or getting a raise or picking up a side hustle. Your income is one part of this equation. So those are the 4 factors, the main things that it takes to get a home loan. But I've got some double bonus opportunities happening in 2026. New construction deals. Now, I know there are a lot of hardcore people out there that say that new homes are crappy construction and put together with tape and staples. I got to tell you, new home builders are not my favorite people, but it's not because of the quality of the homes that they build. I've discussed my disdain for them on the podcast before, because what they're doing is intentionally limiting their building, lowering desperately needed housing inventory, and they're doing that so home prices keep rising. They're messing with supply and demand on purpose. And then what they're doing right now in 2026 is sickening. They're blaming it on supposedly skyrocketing prices and costs in their materials and labor. BS. You're building the same home today that you built in 2021, and home prices are up between 45 and 50%, depending on what data you're looking at. I am pretty darn sure that the cost of materials and labor has not increased that much, but I digress. Let me get into the advantages for you. So it's good for you to understand that and realize that they had some pretty high expectations in 25 and 26, and they built too many homes. They overbuilt for the demand that happened, which means right now there are some very affordable townhome and starter home options that the builders are actually offering you tons of incentives. They're giving cheaper loans and tons of cash back. And if you think the home is cheaply built, hey, guess what? That home, most of the new home tracks, what they're doing is they're setting it up in the most desirable up and coming areas. And that is always going to be valuable land. Now, before you even do one thing in your research for home loans, this is a gigantic warning. Absolutely stop. Do not research, do not sign up, and definitely don't visit any new construction home sites. Never even sign a little guest book, or never even give them an email when you go online, because they're going to make you sign the guest book, or they're going to make you sign up an email to give you the actual prices. And when you do that, they're going to rake you over the coals. If you do that on your own, you're going to be locked into working with not only the builder real estate agent, who is not there to protect you, they work for the builder. You're also going to be locked into only working with the builder's lender, who has no incentive because you're doing one deal with them one time and then you're done. So don't get locked in, because then you're going to decrease all these killer incentives that are available in 2026. You need to get a team that is going to be your advocate and protect you and fight for you in the deal. That means talking to a realtor and a lender before you ever do any research on the new construction homes. I've said it a million times. What they are doing, it absolutely should be illegal. They can't, well, legally, I think that they should not be able to force you just because you sign a piece of paper or fill out an email. But guess what? The big builders are the one who line the pockets of Washington. So it's not illegal. And in fact, right now, our head at the FHFA, the Government Administrative Oversight that is supposed to protect and look out for housing affordability, yeah, he is a Pulte from Pulte Homes. So guess who he's looking out for? So to protect yourself, every home buyer should listen to episode 392 if you're even thinking about looking for a new home. Be sure that you understand that you know how the game works, and then hire a badass real estate support team to help you grab some killer deals from the desperate new home builders that are actually given some pretty nice incentives in the 2026 market. Bam! There it is. That is your bite-sized knowledge nuggets on the foundational 4 factors to buying your first home. If you want more details, check out the 10 steps listed in the episode guide. That starts at episode 400. That's free. And it's the way all of the real life testimonials from the buyers in the interviews that are also in the episode guide, that's how they found their path of least resistance to go from renter to homeowner. And you know what? I'm going to ask you, if you're getting any value out of this podcast, can you take 90 seconds for me and write a review? The stars are great, but a little written review helps. That's why I said 90 seconds on Apple, Spotify, Google. And what that does is it helps more people find us, and it helps spread the message of hope to more people. The truth is out there. It's just hidden. And do me a favor, share it with a friend. Text it right now to one of your most bitter friends who thinks they're going to have to rent forever. Let's spread this revolution of optimism in a jacked up world. You can take control of your life now and discover that there's more leverage out there than you think. Go to howtobuyahome.com. If you got a question, you can ask David. There's a button right there to do that. Or if you want to ask and find out if we've got a local specialized unicorn team that can help you find all your options, there's a button for that too. Find someone, interview them, hire your team way earlier than you thought possible. Because damn it, you shouldn't have to do this on your own. It should not be this hard to unravel the mystery of how to buy your first home. So I'll keep putting out the information. Everything you need to know to discover affordable buying power, it's right here for you. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyaHome.com to get started.